Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our second class on learning about designing with Heaths and Heathers. My name is Sherida Phibbs. I'm the Master Gardener Coordinator for Humboldt and Del Norte counties. Our presenter today is Maria Krinick. Maria has a passion for all things concerning gardening and a great love for Heaths and Heathers. Maria is a busy lady participating in various garden clubs and activities. She says that she has an addiction to learning, which takes her in many directions. I'm very excited today to learn more about Heaths and Heathers and how to bring them into my landscape design. We are the Master Gardeners, and we're volunteers. We're trained and certified through the University of California's Cooperative Extension. We extend science-based educational services to our communities. The 4 important points that we focus on are healthier plants, healthier environments, healthier gardens, which all contributes to healthier communities. Before I turn this over to Maria, I would like to quickly address the questions you may have during the presentation. We're asking everyone to use the chat box to type your questions, and at the end of the presentation, Maria will be addressing your questions. And now for our presenter, Maria, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Sherida. It's a pleasure to be here with this HSU-sponsored Master Gardener series that has included Heaths and Heathers and vegetable gardening, and there's more lectures in the future. So I hope you'll consider signing up for those as well. The next one will be on IPM, Integrated Pest Management, something we can all use in our gardens. But today, as we start with Designing with Heaths and Heathers, I have a lot of pictures to show you and some very basic ideas about how to design with Heaths and Heathers. So the topics we'll discuss today are site planning, expectations about your garden, layouts, what are Heaths and Heathers, designing the garden with Heathers, and style, color, and plant choices, along with planting and ornamentation styles. So where do we start? Well, knowing your garden, knowing what you would like to do in your garden is a good place to start. What your preferences are, how you'll use your garden, what is your basic style, how do you do your garden, your maintenance, your ability to do work, your budget. Knowing your plants and discovering your plant palette is all part of the fun. Now, with using design principles and methods, the same principles apply. Whatever you've heard, seen, or read about design can certainly apply to any garden that you choose to tackle. Volumes and volumes have been written about it, so we're just going to be very basic today. But consider your site analysis. You have to figure out what the characteristics of where you want to plant are. Identify its good and bad points, whether it's sunny or shady, or wet or dry, or accessible or not. The functions and utilities that you're going to use, how the styles you like, and your plant choices, and taking care of your garden. Now, the tools for design are very simple. Paper and pencil, a sketchbook. If you do computer pad and stylus, that's great too. Get a tape measure, a laser measure, or recently I found out I can measure things with my phone. I was really intrigued by that. That was a lot of fun. And then a place to plant, where you want to develop your garden, and then the inspiration. And that inspiration is really important. Sometimes it just starts from, I need a place to read out in the garden, and it goes from there. The method is to, very simply, to create the layout plan of your garden area. So note on paper the space with anything that can't be altered, your utilities, the buildings, the driveways, the trees, all those things, put them there because you can't take up a space that you don't have. Be aware of your sun exposure, your orientation, your wind, and then note assets and problems, the assets of shade or not shade, or drainage, or whatever else that goes on into the garden. And then take that layout that you've created and make several copies of it, put it to one side, leave it alone, and then start doodling on all the copies and be inspired. The site evaluation is that first thing. You have to figure out, will the plants get enough sun and shelter? 6 hours to 8 hours? Is water available, or do you have to develop that? Where are the problem areas? Shade, drainage, all those things can be obstacles, but maybe they're advantages too. How will I get from one place to another? The pathways, and how much space is there? A proportion is very important in a garden, and that depends on the amount of space that you're working with. Do you need fencing to protect the space from critters or create some ornamental aspect to it? And what do I plan to do in there? Do I plan to sit in the garden? Do I plan to entertain in the garden? Do I have a collection of plants that I want to take care of and display? And then what views will be developed, enhanced, borrowed, or created as a result of what I do? And then what style or theme or purpose do you want to pursue? So what are your expectations about your garden? What do you want out of it? A place to sit and relax, grow and enjoy plants, entertain, paint and draw. I wish I could. I would love to do that. To look pretty, meaning a very pretty house and yard and all that. Do you want to get rid of the lawn and not sure how you want to develop it? All of the above. The possibilities are endless and very personal. So give it some thought, give yourself some time. Armed with the site planning and some basic information, start playing around with your layout. Let your imagination start answering questions like linear path lines or curvy ones, short plants or tall ones, trees or ground covers, hard surfaces or soft surfaces. Doodle away with circles and squares and roughly blocked in pathways, planting areas, fences. This is not the time to be exact. This is the time to have that broad creative brush that starts to have elements starting to meld and work together and influence one another. Get a sense of the space with the measurements and elevations. Don't worry about exact plant choices or exact choices in materials right now. Just think in terms of these general, generic kinds of things that help you to start working with the whole concept. Remember to consider the obvious things like sunlight and perspective and space. So as a sort of a interesting note for a lot of us, inspiration comes like a flash sometimes. So it sometimes does help to start by sketching your garden destinations. If you're having trouble figuring out how to start the project, think in terms of where you want to go in your garden, like a doorway or a shady spot or a bench that you're going to sit on, or a table or a water feature or whatever, and then add the paths to get to that space. Suddenly, you'll note that the planting spaces start popping out at you, and this will help you begin to meld the concept that'll ultimately become your garden. And then take each individual space and imagine what it could look like, and the details will start coming forward. Now, admittedly, you may have an inspiration item. You may have found this incredible bench that told you, this is what I love, this is the style I want to plant, so this looks good. and I want to plant so that this is my main focal point. So consider your choices. Style. Like I said, that special bench that you found may have been the inspiration for your style. You know, some of us just like very casual free-for-alls, you know, a little bit here, a little bit there, and it all works together. Some want to imitate nature in a more accessible and functional way. There are formal styles where everything is lined up or orderly or really designated in certain forms. There are different cultural forms like Asian gardens. And of course, there's collectors' gardens where we have one of everything and trying to make that workable and usable for us. There are cottage gardens and perennial gardens and on and on and on. And then on top of that, you have color choices and how colors work. We work with colors and how colors work for us. And then there's plant choices. So there's a variety of gardens to create. Cottage gardens, perennial style borders, collectors gardens where there's one of everything or mixing of collections that work well together. Asian gardens, there are very formal structured rules for certain types of gardens, and sometimes we can take that effect and work with it in a different way so that you use a non-traditional palette, for instance, to create an original effect. A natural style, a natural stream bed that you want to imitate in your own property, in your own garden. Many, many more, public gardens and private. So whatever you decide to do, your choices in use, the function, the shape, the color, the plants and features create that unique garden. And even, I would guess, with the same setup of preferences and color choices and all that, every garden would be unique. So style choices, let's talk about some style choices can come from elements in your garden. We talked about a bench, or you can see these very different styles just from the implication here of this statuary container versus this very colorful rock walkway. A unique place to sit can create and influence the style and the choices that you make. The fencing that you need and the materials that are available. Adding water, whether it's a pool or a stream or a water feature. Color choices can also result in big changes, whether they're subtle and move from one casual color to another, or very bold, striking, very demonstrative punctuation in the garden. Color affects us, and the colors that you like the best are probably the colors that you would like in your garden. And warm colors and cool colors obviously have different effects. So making color choices is an important variable, and it affects what we're getting from our garden spaces. And so emotionally, by calming or energizing us, it brings out preferences like likes and dislikes in terms of certain plant colors and combinations. It does stimulate creativity, and it can, with the particular color choices, support a theme or a concept or a visual line or emotional effect. So your color choices, what are your color choices? How do you choose and put colors together? What are your favorite colors? Are they the same in clothing as they are in the garden? Who knows? You do. How does color affect you? Do you respond positively to color, or do you need something a little more subtle to keep yourself calm? Do you have that color phobia where you'd rather not have to deal with choices? And so you pick black and white, or you pick gray all the time, whatever it is. And then there are personality inputs too. Are we into spontaneity? Oh, I like that. That's going to do it. I'm going to go for it. Or is the sky the limit? Let's put it all in and go for it. So we have different things that we can work with when we're putting colors together, whether the colors are a subtle variation or monochromatic or very bold or dramatic in contrast, or gradations. I've seen rainbows. I've seen all the shades of pink, all the shades of lavenders, whatever it suits what you would like to do. Do you like bold colors? Do you like colors that you can play with in the light? And positioning them in the garden brings out different color effects. So that kind of play is kind of fun as well. Colors work well together in the garden. I think all of you have found that whatever you plant together, somehow it works out. And nature is that way. It's just gorgeous all the time. So you can have a very simple plant palette, green and pink, or you can have it a little bit more complex, a little bit more exchange of different colors in different places. So with a better sense of what your garden is capable of, what your style and color preferences are and your function use and all that, you can start really seriously considering your plant palette. And of course, here in Humboldt and Del Norte, our plant palette is very broad. And so it's difficult sometimes to make choices. But I would now going to discuss with you considering heathers in your garden. And on the left there is a traditional perennial plant garden with lots of different perennial plants. No heathers there. But a beautiful exuberance of color and plants and sizes and textures. And on the right is a heather garden. Again, beautiful color, texture, different types of things going on there as well. So when you design with heather, the traditional means is drifts. They lend themselves well to drifts of color, drifts of varieties, but lots of different garden styles are possible, and they integrate themselves within broader palette garden styles as well. From collectors' gardens where there's, and with the heather group, there's probably a good 1,500 plants if you collected one of everything. So you could make quite extensive gardens just with heathers. You can combine them with different conifer different collections that go well with the heathers, like conifers, like grasses, like rhododendrons and azaleas, the traditional thing. And then you can mold them into different forms and styles by understanding the different styles and fitting the heathers in appropriately. But there's so many other ways to create it, a beautiful garden just by using a few heathers. So what are the heaths and heathers? We had an extensive talk about a week ago. It seems like a month ago, but it's a week ago. And they're basically a group of evergreen flowering shrubs of these three genuses, Calluna, Erica, and Debetia, in the Ericaceae family. They have many qualities to be helpful to the gardener. For me, my major concern was deer resistance, because I have lots of deer coming through. But with the drought tolerant and few pests and diseases and fairly low maintenance and low cultural needs, they're tough, they live long, they have an interesting history. They exist in the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere, from the Arctic Circle through Europe, Mediterranean, Africa, and Madagascar, things like places like that. But they're also a good source of pollen for bees and butterflies. They're havens for wildlife, birds, the traditional sort of romantic notion is the grouse on the moor and all that stuff. But here I've got plenty of birds nesting and utilizing my garden. They are evergreen. They have a tremendous variety. You can use them in containers and for flower arranging. And you've got different effects all year round with them, with dynamic bloom and foliage color displays. So if you choose to have only heathers in the garden can be very successful and give you, they enjoy the same conditions, so they're gonna grow well together. There are many varieties, different sizes, heights, textures, bloom periods, and they provide that kind of color and bloom throughout the year for you and for your critters and your pollinators. And so they're easy to grow together. Now with a strictly heather garden design, no heather garden that I've ever seen has ever looked like any other heather garden because the combinations are endless, absolutely endless. And then within one garden, you have changes that can happen on a weekly basis that changes your whole garden look. They are typically in drifts. And here's a drift that utilizes one plant. This is Celebration, stays that color all year, blooms white. But what an effect that creates. And then you can line them along a walk. The picture on the right is actually a winter picture. You'll notice there's no leaves on the tree. And these are all winter blooming ericas. So you have a garden and a walkway all year round. For large gardens and small gardens, the sense of proportion can work. This larger flat garden has many, many varieties, but as you look across it, there's lots of different textures and colors and a kaleidoscope of changing effects throughout the year. Well, the one on the right is actually a little fairy garden, and by choosing your plants well, you can keep it to scale for the small fairy garden. They can be very simple and they can be very grand, just whatever you choose. Now, how do you manage plants in a design? One of the most challenging decisions of garden design are the plants, and we are confounded by them the most. But good garden design starts with a concept of utilizing space and putting the plants in that space to enhance their appearance as well. Developing the language of plants where you can, in your encyclopedic draw, you can pull out plants that you say, oh, that'll be perfect for that spot. That takes some experience, some time, some research, and so therefore can be one of the most frustrating things to have to work with. So start simple, start in terms of general and generic kinds of concepts for how you want to use the space. And then you can find out what the other plants are. Go to someone that will help you make those plant choices. It's like learning a new language. Once you've got some basic concepts down and you've got some basic words, then you can go to the next level where you can start making sentences and start communicating and feeling like you're understanding as well. But one shortcut that helps us work is with that generic plant concept. Oh, okay, I need a plant that's not going to be more than 10 feet tall, 3 feet wide, and I would love for it to have fall color. And then you can do that research from that kind of generic concept. So work in actual plant choices in the later design period. In the layout time, you're deciding on the generic plant type. So mixing and matching the plant palette is another thing to do when, if you're going to, most of us do. That's what we do. Generally, one plant type garden is not that common. So how do Heaths and Heathers fit into that? Well, make sure, no matter what plants you're choosing, that when you're putting plants together, they work well together because they want similar water, soil, zoning, and sun needs. With Heaths and Heathers, you can choose a broad spectrum of plants, so long as they don't need heavy fertilizer, or they don't need alkaline soils, you are safe to try. Conifers are a traditional choice. Grasses, any rhododendrons, things like that always do really well. But experimenting can be fun. And in the years that I've been working with Heathers, there have been very few plants that don't work well with Heathers, so long as you respect the choices of fertilizer and water needs and sun exposure. You can change it up with color and form and texture when you use other plants. You can create patterns and unique relationships between those plants. Knowing the individual varieties is the most difficult. So go back to that generic plant thing and let your research and your experience lead you to more plants. Now here's, I'll show you some pictures real quick of basic combinations, Heathers and conifers. In these two photographs, you see everything from maple trees to looks like a birch tree and roses and lavenders and ferns, all kinds of things get along well together. There are a lot of different bedfellows, the hydrangea, the succulents, the different ornamental grasses. So then we might choose some more in terms of color choices, so that with a mixed border, depending on the colors that you favor, that you want to go into, you have a lot of choice in terms of adding color from different types of plants along with your Heathers. So color choices do affect style choices. You can create color effects, you can play with the color, and it'll help you decide on your plant palette. So you can bring a lot of color to your garden with Heaths and Heathers. And so with Heathers, they are adaptable to many themes, styles, and perspectives. A wide spectrum of bloom, color, and foliage color. Seasonal changes make the garden very exciting all year round. You can use them in many, many ways. Lining walkways, islands of color, stacked in colors, floral arrangements, containers. And they're good for small or large gardens. Most of the Heathers have all these qualities of texture and sizes, and many to choose from. And they have a wide range of bloom color, generally white, pink, and purple, and all their many variations. But their bloom year also includes January through December, with the winter ericas taking up the winter months, and the summer, everyone's in the mix, and then later on in summer and fall. So you also get a variety of bloom, shape, size, and pose. And that's all the result of the tremendous genetic diversity and selection and manipulation occurred because of their range of habitat. So just an example of the range of bloom colors. And then the bloom periods, summer and winter. And then how you can manipulate the color effects by their juxtaposition or from their form. If they're soft and airy, different light penetrates different textures differently. There are also foliage color effects to work with a broad range of color choices from green, silver, grays, and whites to red, yellows, and golds and bronze, and also seasonal effects. So you can just look at the different varieties, and of course more colors. Green is always good, and then blue adds to that. Silver and gray and white. Yellows, golds, bronze, and oranges. And then multicolored and variegated, where the leaf is not necessarily, the branches are not necessarily the same color and not necessarily the same color all the time. And then there's seasonal growth changes. There's a significant number of them that their new growth in spring changes color. This is a plant called shearston that it has gray foliage through the year, but in the spring its new growth is cream, blushes pink, and then goes to salmon. And then it blooms mauve in the summer. And then you have fall and winter changes. This is a lot of frost on this particular garden. But in summer and winter, you get different effects as well, especially in Kaluna. If you imagine a maple tree changing colors in the fall, many Kalunas will do the same. So the changing seasons bring changing color tones as well. And some of them are subtle or dramatic. And then you can add texture. Look at the texture that's involved in that left-hand photo. We've got the grasses in the background, the conifers, and then some sort of perennial, I believe, and the heathers in the foreground. And then you can present with rock and water for texture and change. You can create patterns, even more patterns, whatever your imagination brings you to develop. Adaptive to a lot of perspectives, whether it's the micro where you're walking along a walk and you bend down and you see a bumblebee on a heather flower, or you're looking out of your home into a long landscape through a very beautiful window. And uphill or on the flat, soft effects on curves and walkways or hard linear effects. Can create islands of color, multi-layers of color with companion plants and without. Structures always enhance a garden and can be enhanced with heaths and heathers. Statuary, birdhouses, benches, you know, painted pots, whatever your imagination brings you to do. You can also, if you have a smaller garden or you have areas you want to decorate, they're beautiful in containers. They seem to have the intelligence to grow slowly if they're in a small environment. Watering is the main concern in containers, but they're adaptable to many types of containers. Whether they're window boxes and movable, or you're creating miniature fairy gardens and decorative elements. Flower arranging is a lot of fun with heathers. Some of the blooms are very small, so they adapt well to small arrangements, and others can be arrangements that are very large, 3 feet dimensions. They also do well with drying. The arrangement on the left is an arrangement that was made dry and lasted quite a long time. Wildlife loved the heathers too. Remember that heathers and honeybees, evolved together. Bumblebees love them as well, and butterflies. And in my garden can be buzzing all year round and flitting little butterflies all over. And the birds love to sit on them and squeak at me when I'm walking through the garden. You can also have a little fun with your gardens. Whether you're doing the fairy gardens or miniature gardens, or you're doing a railroad gardens. They're very adaptable, and your plant palette will reflect that. So we're actually near the end of our lecture, so we're ahead of schedule. I was afraid we were going to have too many pictures to look at, but this gives us an opportunity to kind of review some of the things we learned, and that is design is very basic in terms of the fundamentals that you learn from it. Knowing where and what you want, and making a plan, laying it out, and then filling in the details is the usual process that can become very successful. So for those people who love to make lists, here's a place you can make a lot of lists: colors, textures, plants, shapes, whatever. Make your original site map and doodle away on copies. Pick a viewpoint or perspective that really helps in design. If for nothing else, it helps you to concentrate on one thing at a time. So have the exercise of sitting on your front porch or looking out your kitchen window or whatever and say, what do I want to see out there? And how is this going to work? And if you have a large space, move yourself around in that space and see what your viewpoint or your perspective will be. That's one of the reasons we have our paths as a very important element in design. It directs our view. It takes us on the journey of exploration through a garden so that we can see the different things that we want to create and want to enjoy. Don't forget that a garden needs maintenance. So worry about watering and how you're going to make that work. Worry about how you're going to access it. That's one of the major mistakes I made, is that I didn't realize I was going to have difficulty getting into certain parts of my garden. And so I've had to deal with it in a different way. Take opportunities to explore what other people have done with their gardens, whether it's in garden magazines or books or garden tours. One of the big things with being part of a garden club or whatever is being able to go out and see other people's gardens. You can learn a lot from walking up and down your street. I don't happen to have a real street for me to look at, so I love the garden tours that I get to experience through the garden clubs and things like that. But every opportunity you get to see someone else's perspective only enhances your own. Learn about plants, learn about how they are healthy. It's the best way to keep a garden healthy. Always do your best to influence, to encourage beneficial insects, butterflies, and wildlife to your garden. I know that some wildlife can create quite a mess. And so you have to learn to live with that or correct for it. And that can also offer creativity. Always experiment and play off a theme, play off a color choice, play off a new variety, whatever. But do pay attention to your garden. Keep a journal, notes, photos, but also enjoy the garden you have created. Some of the greatest pleasure I've had these last couple of months has been able to sit down with my cup of coffee and my wine once in a while, and sitting down and enjoying the prospect of what I'm going to do next in the garden. So with that, I would like to encourage you to use heathers in your gardens, but if you don't just use heathers, please do gardens. Enjoy your garden. And I've also included some reading materials for heathers specifically. There's, like I said, a volume of design materials and design books that will be effective for you out there. And then, of course, we do have heather societies with here and the North American Heather Society. Our local chapter here is active in giving workshops, and if we ever get back to it, all those wonderful garden tours. So with that, I think Sherida is going to take over, and so go ahead there, Sherida.
Maria, thank you. That was such great information, and those pictures are sure inspirational. And I know myself, I'm looking forward to the fall when I can start pulling out some of my front landscaping and replacing it with these beautiful heathers. So great inspiration. Thank you. The Master Gardeners are available to answer your home gardening questions. And our advice to grow by help desk can be located on our website. And on that page is a help desk ticket form. And you can complete it, upload a couple of pictures, and our team of Master Gardeners will respond back to you, usually within a week. On our first presentation, it is recorded and is on our website. And this one also will be put on our website. And I'll follow that up with an email to you with those links so you'll have that information. So we want you to follow good advice. You know, there's a lot of information if people Google, and you'll get, you know, somebody's information on what they do and some home remedies of what to do. But we want you to follow good, solid, science-based information. And you can find different links on our website. And also there's the California Garden Web and the Sunset Western Garden Book. If you don't have that in your library, you certainly want to make sure that you have it in your library. It is a good source of information to have. UC IPM website is www.ipm.ucanr.edu. And once you get into that website, you'll see what I've circled in red, which is the home garden, turf, and landscape test. And when you click into that, then you can filter into an area where you want to find out information. And there's all kinds of information on cultural needs for plants, as well as managing weeds and insects and diseases of plants. And so that is the Master Gardener's go-to website when we have questions. And this is one of the resources that we use all of the time. Okay, I think we are ready for some questions, Maria. Let me just open up my chat box here. And the first one is, we have some people who didn't attend the first presentation. So can you explain the difference between Heaths and Heathers?
You know, I kind of chuckled because I remembered on one of my first tours when I was surrounded by experts, I was terrified that somebody was going to ask me which one was a Heath and which one was a Heather. So the problem begins because the two words are used for in so many different ways. But botanically, the Heath is specifically the Erica genus, and the Heather is specifically the Calluna genus. But collectively, the whole group are called heathers. And so that's where the confusion is. Very casually, the Ericas have a lot of different kind of leaf forms. They tend to be a little needly and generally green. The Colunas tend to look more like conifers. They have segmentation that kind of curls up on itself and kind of scales almost on it. But those are the two basic differences with it. The Dabetia is part of that group, and it's never called, has it called sometimes the Irish Heath? It may, but generally it is in a category kind of by itself. And those are the three groups that are involved there. It's just a matter of looking and experiencing it, and you'll catch on to it pretty quick. But that's the words, the semantics of it.
Okay. So the next question is there a better time to relocate or prune? And how do I know when that best time is?
Let's talk with pruning very quickly. After bloom is rule 1 with pruning. Now that's complicated enough because so many different heaths and heathers bloom at different times of the year. So if you have a broad spectrum of these plants, you're either going to be pruning every other month, or you can say to yourself, I'm going to prune in fall, or I'm going to prune in spring. And that's again based on after bloom. Now the second thing I would consider is when the gardener is available. Because if you tend to hate spring weather and are going to stay indoors, then do your fall pruning. If you travel in the fall, you're going to wind up doing your pruning in the spring. But the two big things to note is not to prune when the weathers are extreme. So please do not prune in the dead heat of summer, because you're exposing more fragile foliage to sunburn. Or don't prune in the dead of winter, because you're exposing new fresh growth to the whimsies of frost and cold weather. So if you kind of hanker to those rules, and you'll be pretty safe with all the plants in your heather garden. If you are very punctual about everything, then you may pick a day and say, I'm going to prune on October 31st, and go for it. That works. So after bloom, when the gardener is available and not in extreme weather. And now with relocating, I would have to say the same basic rule applies in terms of relocating. Relocating in summer is difficult unless you're going to be right on top of that plant to make sure it's watered. Because when you relocate a heather, especially a heather that's more than 5 years old, you have lost a substantial amount of root. And that plant is going to need to be supported with water. So I would tend to advise you to do it in the fall or in the early spring, when the plant can get substantially supported with water and not extreme weather for a period of time until it can send out new root shoots. One of the methods that I would use would be, 1, water the plant vigorously before you transplant it. Cut a substantial root ball around the plant. Generally, you can say where the foliage ends is about where you should cut that root ball. Cut it away from the thing and lift it en masse. The roots are a thick mass of roots and dirt. Pull that up. Obviously, it's been given a little extra water before you do that, and move it to its new site that's been preserved, and make sure that you're right on top of the watering, unless it's raining every single day or every other day during that period. the plant needs to get those roots going, because heathers, amongst all other plants, believe roots first, everything else later. And you may not see a lot of growth until it's established that root system again and decides it's safe, and it'll go for the growth.
Just to follow up on that question, I have a question, Maria. So when you're transplanting, would it be advisable then to prune down some of the foliage so there is not, you prune down the mass? Would that be advisable when you are relocating?
It can be done, especially if the plant has a lot of straggly growth. You can bring it down a bit. I wouldn't cut into a lot of dead wood, a lot of old wood to do that. But certainly if it reduces some of the volume, and you can, if you're transplanting in the fall, most of the time you're cutting off, you're having to prune for bloom anyway, after bloom. So you might as well get the pruning done before you dig it up. But it isn't totally necessary.
So the next question is, do you have any tips on overcoming the emotional aspect of removing healthy plants from your garden? Thinning out an area is so hard to do because the blooms are healthy, just too bountiful. Have already moved them around the garden, and I'm looking to manage this and thin it. And also, is there a local donation or gleaning program for these plants?
Okay, it is a problem that we all face because we are so fortunate in having a climate that grows plants usually larger and more full than we're led to believe. And we are also gardeners that are very enthusiastic about planting too many plants in a space. So we do face this problem a lot. I am not aware of any places for fostering or strays of plants. Neighbors usually work. You could try neighbors. In the garden club, I know we communicate amongst each other if we have a plant and we're willing to share. But generally, all we can do is hope that we make good decisions in terms of moving a plant around. A plant is more likely to move around easily and succeed if it's younger. If it's an older plant, a lot of times you just have to be very tough and very sad to lose something that's too large or not working in a space. Sometimes you have to make that decision because other plants are beginning to suffer from it being there. So I'm sorry, I don't have any easy answers for that one.
We'll take these Q&As and we'll have them on our website, so they'll be available for you if you want to go back and rehear what Maria had to say about this. So our next presentation is this Thursday, and it's on IPM, Managing Pests in Your Home and Garden. And we also have some additional classes. Next Tuesday will be a session on success with houseplants. And then the following week will be reducing building risks to wildfire. And that will be presented by our director, Yana. And that will be our last presentation for the year. We thank you for joining us today, and Maria, thank you for all of the great information, and I look forward to start planting.
Thank you, for all your help.
Yeah, you're welcome. So thank you, everyone. We enjoyed it today. Thank you.
Bye now.